You know, when you drop your kid off at a nursery, you're placing a ton of trust in them for their physical safety. But what about their digital safety? What happens when the very systems meant to keep you in the loop and keep things running just completely fall apart? Today, we're going to dissect a cyber attack on a nursery chain and see how a whole cascade of simple failures led to an absolute digital disaster.
All right, let's get into it. This mind map you're seeing, this is basically our evidence board for the entire breakdown. I know, it looks a little complicated right now, but trust me, we're going to use this to do a full-on forensic postmortem, tracing every single mistake, every miscalculation, and every design flaw that pretty much made this attack inevitable.
So where do we even begin our investigation? Well, it starts with the immediate aftermath of the breach. You see, in the world of cybersecurity, any secure system is really built on three core pillars. And in this case, the attackers didn't just knock one of them down. Nope, they went straight for the foundation itself. And those pillars? They're known as the CIA triad. And no, not that CIA. This one stands for confidentiality, which just means your data is kept private. Integrity, meaning the data is accurate and nobody's messing with it. And finally, availability, which is simply the promise that you can actually get to your information when you need it. This is pretty much the gold standard for InfoSec. Now, what's really interesting here is how they attacked. They didn't kick things off by stealing data, which would have been a breach of confidentiality. Instead, their very first move was to attack availability. Their entire goal was to just knock the nursery's whole digital presence offline, making it completely and utterly inaccessible.
To do this, they used a classic distributed denial of service attack, or DDoS, to just overwhelm the system. And the real-world impact was immediate and chaotic. This wasn't some minor IT headache, it totally crippled their business operations. Just try to imagine being a parent, suddenly unable to get critical info or even communicate with the people looking after your child. That's the kind of chaos we're talking about here, all from a failure of availability.
Okay, so the attack worked. But that brings up the next big question. Why was the nursery so vulnerable to begin with? I mean, how did this happen so easily? To answer that, we have to shift from the technical side of the breach to the human element, a complete and total failure in risk management.
And here's the thing. This wasn't some sophisticated super hacker attack. The threat was a really common DDoS attack, the kind often carried out by pretty low-skilled attackers. The nursery was what you'd call a soft target, simply because they hadn't bothered to invest in security. And here is the fatal mistake. They saw an attack as being high impact, sure, but low probability. It's that classic "it'll never happen to us" mindset. And because of that, they just accepted the risk and chose not to put in even the most basic, low-cost security controls. So, that terrible decision-making at the management level, well, it created the absolute perfect storm for the third part of our investigation, the technical security design, or maybe more accurately, the total lack of one. This is where we see exactly how they left all the digital doors wide open. You see, good security is all about something called defense in depth, having multiple layers of protection. Think of it like you're defending a castle. This nursery had no DDoS protection. That's like having no shield against a battering ram. They had no web application firewall. That's like having no guards at the gate. And they had no network segmentation, which is like having no walls inside the castle. If an attacker got past one point, the entire system was exposed. They were missing all the essential layers. And because those layers just weren't there, they created what's called an immense attack surface. They had all these unnecessary services connected to the internet, totally unsecured login pages, and they were relying on a single, basic piece of hardware like your home router to protect everything. They didn't just leave one door unlocked, they left every single window and door in the building wide open. This brings us to a really fundamental principle of good design, the idea of failing securely. When your system is under attack, does it lock itself down to protect everything, or does it just fail open, exposing everything? Yeah, there's failed open. They didn't even have a simple static backup web page to give parents emergency contact info. When the main system went down, the whole shebang went down with it. So as we start to wrap up this investigation, we get to the foundational takeaway. This wasn't just one single mistake. It was a chain reaction, a domino effect, a cascade of failures, where poor risk management led directly to flawed technical design, which created a system that was basically just waiting to fail. This quote from the analysis really says it all. This disaster wasn't the work of some brilliant hacker. It was a direct consequence of failing to do the absolute basics.
This is basically the cybersecurity version of building a house with no foundation, and then acting surprised when it collapses in a light breeze.
So let's just recap those core weaknesses one more time. An almost complete lack of layered defenses, really inadequate risk management that was driven by a totally false sense of security, and a fundamental failure to design a system that was secure from the ground up. And each weakness just made the others that much worse.
And now, let's look at our evidence board one last time. What looked like a complex web when we started has actually become a very, very simple story. It's a story about how ignoring the fundamentals of security, from the boardroom all the way down to the server room, can have disastrous real-world consequences. It just proves that foundational security isn't some tiny detail, it's everything.
Which, of course, leaves us with one final and I think crucial question to think about. We just saw how easily a service we're supposed to trust can be completely crippled just by neglecting the basics. So, what does secure really mean for the banks, the hospitals, and the schools that you and I rely on every single day?